To lovers, the moon is a thing of beauty. But to this man it is a deadly curse. When the moon is full, this miserable wretch turns into a hairy, snarling half-man, half-beast that prowls the night, his fangs thirsty for human blood. He is a werewolf.
Hello and welcome to the Werewolf by Night podcast. I'm your co-host, Matt Howell.
And I'm Jacob Balcom.
And this is our first episode. We're going to be celebrating all things Marvel's #1 lycanthrope, Werewolf by Night. Jacob, explain how the premise of this show is going to go, or how it's going to work a little bit.
Well, I think our rough plan is to do an episode, go through it, talk a little bit about the history of the comic, a little bit about history of werewolves in comics, at least Marvel Comics, the Comics Code. We'll talk about a bunch of things like that.
Yeah. So why are we doing this?
Well,
and who are we, for God's sakes?
Well, I was an honored guest on your previous podcast. That's Cool, That's Trash. You and I have known each other for about 16 years, I think.
Yeah.
And we played music together. We've been really good friends for a long time. And I'm a huge comic fan. You're a huge comic fan. And a while back, you had recommended this Werewolf by Night to me. And because I had not read it. I've read a ton of comics and a ton of Bronze Age comics, but had just never gotten around to it. I think because even the Marvel Essential collecteds were really expensive online. Like, it's not easy to get this stuff.
It is not. And so, yes, you are a comics beast. And Jacob is you're a published comics historian. You have done research and published a piece about some Golden Age comics, correct?
Yeah, for the Overstreet Guide, I did the research for an article my good friend John McClure wrote about the history of Israel Waldman and IW Super Comics.
Right. So you know what you're talking about.
I mean, kind of.
Yeah, so I was surprised that maybe you had never read Werewolf by Night. And if you folks out there are just listening along for giggles and you don't know much about Werewolf by Night, we're talking about Marvel Bronze Age monster stuff. So how do we set the stage here for folks to understand why Marvel dove into monsters headfirst in 1971 and felt the need to have this whole line that included Tomb of Dracula, Werewolf by Night, Tales of the Zombie. There was a Frankenstein one, right? Also,
yeah, it was first called The Monster of Frankenstein, and then it switched to the Frankenstein's Monster. It's kind of confusing and clunky, both those titles, but It was still a pretty cool book.
And The Living Mummy.
That's right.
Briefly.
Yeah,
that was the end
briefly.
of the end of the breaking wave there. Why did Marvel do this, Jacob?
I think to put it in context, and we'll just go back a little bit. Comics. There were a lot of horror comics in the 50s, late 40s, early 50s, and a man named Fredric Wertham didn't like that and thought that they were a bad influence on our children and would make kids kill each other, do horrible things. So he wrote this book called Seduction of the Innocent. And that, along with these Senate subcommittee hearings that he had called for, made a thing called the Comics Code go into place. I think that was in 1954. It was October of 1954. And this was a code that basically said you couldn't have fun in comics anymore. Yeah. So you couldn't, there could be no more horror, really nothing of anything. I mean, it even kind of banned the any type of real romance, or I called it anything that led up to seduction was not allowed anymore. No blood, gore. Let me read a little bit of it that pertains to what we're talking about.
Please.
This is from General Standards Part B. It says, no comic magazine shall use the word horror or terror in its title. Then you go down here and it says scenes dealing with or instruments associated with Walking Dead, torture and vampires and vampirism, ghouls, cannibalism, and werewolfism is prohibited.
So prior to this, the comics were kind of the Wild West, right? As far as content, there were some pretty lurid crime comics out there. There was these wonderful horror stuff. Some of them were also pretty tasteless. It's almost like the Hays Code for film. I mean, film kind of self-regulated and did its own thing. And then the Hays Code came along, and it's like, you can't show somebody breaking the law and prospering in the end. You can't show somebody, and all the fun went out of everything. And
yeah,
so
it's real similar to the Hays Code. You're right.
Yeah. And so from 1954 until, and I don't know why the Comics Code let up in 1970, but they did.
Yeah, they let up in 1971. There was a few things, I guess, a little bit of an uproar. Marv Wolfman was mentioned in a story that he wrote in one of the House of Secrets. And the Comics Code were like, oh, you can't say Wolfman in this comic. And they were like, well, it's the author. It's the author of the comic. And so it's funny, after that, they did kind of, loosen the code a bit. If I could read from the revision of 1971.
Please.
Same section, General Standards Part B. Now it says, scenes dealing with or instruments associated with Walking Dead or torture shall not be used. Vampires, ghouls, and werewolves shall be permitted to be used when handled in the classic tradition, such as Frankenstein, Dracula, and other high-caliber literary works.
Okay. So that's cool. They laid tracks, and then they backed out 15 years later.
Yeah.
Thank goodness. Maybe it's after a few, years of Vietnam War footage on nightly news and seeing a president's head blown off on national TV and his brother murdered. I think they realized there were some bigger issues out there, and maybe Fredric Wertham was a chode.
Yeah, I think that definitely was the case, but it led to this kind of horror renaissance at Marvel.
Yes, and so culturally, there was already a monster craze going on because in the late 50s, early 60s, the famous shock theater package of films, of Universal horror films, those were all sent out to all the local networks and affiliates around the country. So for a reasonable price, you got this package of classic Universal horror films. And these were all, including stuff by, made by Whale, Frankenstein, the first two Frankensteins, and Todd Browning. And I mean, there was some really classic stuff in there. There's some great gothic horror, some atmospheric stuff. This was all packaged up and sent off to local stations. And then they would frequently have their weatherman or a sports guy or somebody or a copywriter just put on a cape and get out of a cardboard coffin and introduce these shows. And that's where the horror host craze kind of came from. It started off a little bit earlier with Vampira and Zachary, but I mean, when the shock theater package went out and this stuff was just playing on a rainy Saturday afternoon or whenever a ball game got rained out, that's when kids started going crazy. And then the early 60s, when this stuff was just on all the time late at night or on a rainy Sunday, the Aurora model building kits of like these classic horror movie scenes came out, and Monster Mash. You have all the novelty songs. The monster craze was in full effect, and I love that it was still going 10 years later. At this point where we're talking about, which is 71, when this starts. Because I would have thought that would have, I don't know, auto-tuner still around, so I guess maybe I just think things are going to be shorter lived than they are. But like, I was surprised.
Kids love monsters. They just do.
Yeah, Monster Kids. You're right. Monster Kid craze was going strong. And at this point, for a quick reference, Marvel, prior to becoming Marvel in the early 60s, was Atlas Comics, and they published a wide line of books, in particular some horror and sci-fi-ish kind of things that were the watered-down post-Comics Code horror stuff. There's still some good stuff in there here and there, but nothing quite like the pre-code EC comics that everyone knows and loves, I think. But they had taken over the industry, really. DC had revitalized by taking their Golden Age heroes and rebooting them with new legacy characters, and making them a little more sci-fi, a little more snappier and brighter, and a little whatever for the late 50s. Green Lantern, The Flash, stuff like that. But Marvel cracked this code in the early 60s of really writing for the audience. And that was realizing that's not just little kids that are reading these things. This is teenagers and college students. And so when he started appealing to them and putting a little bit of like teen drama in there and dealing with the whole concept of a teenager with powers and being ostracized or dealing with being a reject of society because you are different, a lot of teenagers really responded to that, right? I mean, the concept of teenager really became huge after World War II, right? I mean, that's when teenage alien, teenage zombies, teenage whatever. That was when it became like this concept of like there's a thing between puberty and adulthood, and kids are really fucking weird then. And it's like, oh, I know. They're like, it's like the teenage years are weird years. Yeah. So Marvel had been killing it with the first family, Fantastic Four. That book had been crushing. They created the Hulk, Spider-Man. Who else are the flagship biggies?
Flagship biggies were like, the X-Men, the Kirby Lee X-Men, Daredevil, all the real early. Yeah, the first wave of Marvel Silver Age stuff is still really impressive. Like in the last year or so, I went back and read the whole Kirby run of FF, which is, almost 100 issues, not quite, but it's great. And that early stuff, especially the early FF and the early Spider-Man, the Ditko stuff, obviously, and it really holds up. It's still just a tremendous read.
I feel like in the late 60s is when the college kids really started getting into the weed and the LSD and Doctor Strange and Hulk for president. That's when all that kind of stuff on campuses was going on. There was like the blacklight posters of Doctor Strange and the outer space stuff like that. So at this point, Marvel was crushing and killing it. I feel like DC was just about to kind of revitalize with Neil Adams and all that stuff. They were just about to catch a wave that took them in the 70s and probably exceed Marvel in many ways. But at this point, Marvel had about how many titles was it? 12 or 13 around the 1970?
Oh, I mean, but it was going to explode from, that to, I think by 72, they were going to have 40 titles.
Right. And so these monster books were part of this editorial dictum, right? Like, we need to get more shelf space. We need to command this. We've got sales are great. Let's get more titles out there. And they had a new distributor that was allowing them to put out as many books as they wanted. They were kind of hobbled before. They were only able to put out 8 books a month for a long time, just because of kind of a bad move on the publisher's part, using a bad distributor who eventually went out of business, then having to go back and use DC's distributor. And DC was like, nah, you're not going to print everything you want. You're just going to do 8 books a month. And so that was that way for a long time, which may have contributed to why those early Marvel books were so good, because they only had a few shots a month to put stuff out. I've wondered that, if that was kind of one of the reasons that limitation made them try to fill those books with so much. Yeah, I don't know if I knew that distribution backstory before, so I might not have known that. Interesting. That kind of set the stage there, hopefully. I know that's a little bit drawn out, but that's where horror comics kind of came from. That's where they were at this point, and that's where Marvel was, sitting in the catbird seat with all these great sales and wanting to take over the 70s. And that's where we are now. You were saying to me offline that the Bronze Age might be your favorite comics era.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I think what I read the most of is a combination of Golden Age and Bronze Age. I think the main years of the code, while I think it's very important what went on at both companies during the Silver Age, I find a lot of it is kind of boring to me, especially the mid to late 60s Marvel stuff. I think isn't as interesting to me. I feel like the stories were really, pretty tame. And I think a lot of that is the code. Yeah. And once the code started loosening for both companies is when I think things started to get interesting again. You have the House of Secrets, House of Mystery, weird war tales going on over at DC, and you have the horror line starting here. And that's when, that's when I check in. That's what I end up reading the most of is probably, Bronze Age.
I love Bronze Age because I think Silver Age is kind of my go-to place, just because that's when a lot of my favorite heroes were created. The Ditko run of Spider-Man, and then and Romita Sr. That whole first, I don't know, that whole era for me, like the late 60s, is what I love in a pop art sense, but I think the writing is a little bit uneven, to say the least, definitely. But I guess my issue with some of the Bronze Age stuff was I feel like that's when there was a lot of fads going on, and Marvel in particular would jump on any fad that would happen. And I remember like rereading, I think I made some effort like 10 years ago to reread Spider-Man in order, every comic published essentially, that had his name in the title. Mm-hmm. And when he got to the 70s, there was a trucker character. There was a guy called Big Wheel that was just a guy that just drove a giant wheel, and he was at this hub of it. There was a guy called Razorback. Like it felt like if somebody, it was like, who's the beef? Like if anything like that, just make a character out of it. That was on TV. So people are saying that. Sakatumi, we got to have Sakatumi Man. He's got to fight Spider-Man next month. We got to get it in there. So the 70s to me is a lot like that. But, I try not to be too biased against it because they did a lot of batshit stuff in there. And, I think it's because the code was lifted, and there was also this kind of like, the heroes were big up through World War II, and then kids didn't really care much about heroes anymore, and they wanted horror and other stuff. And then, the heroes had their resurgence in the late 50s, early 60s. And I think that kind of, it has its own cycle, right? So 10 years of doing these, making new heroes, telling their stories, grinding them out once a month. I felt like in the 70s, they were like, what can we do now? So between the code lifting and them just kind of trying to be a little progressive, I think you get some pretty weird stories. Like how long after the code relaxed did it take for them to kill Gwen Stacy?
Not too long. I mean, that's Conway. It's what Conway's, most known for, is that and creating the Punisher. And that's early 70s, if I'm correct.
I think it's like 72, but I'm not 100% certain on that one. But they just went weird places like that. You don't usually go outside of an origin story, obviously. Yeah. Disney is happy to start off with dead parents, but they don't want to kill the parents. Bambi's the exception that proves that rule. I mean, it's just kind of the way things are in kid literature, I guess.
No, and I thought things started to get interesting again. I think the hero stuff by the end of the 60s was getting a little stale. I mean, you still had great things going on, it was just getting a bit stale. So I think the turn towards their horror line was a good move, and that's when I check back in, and it's great. And I had read some Tomb of Dracula, I had read some of the other stuff, and I had really liked it. I connected more with the DC horror stuff from the early 70s. I would say I read that a little more than the Marvel stuff, but I have to say I really enjoyed reading Werewolf by Night. I really enjoyed it.
Let's dive in here a little bit. So the publishing history for this was that there was a title called Marvel Spotlight, and it was intended to showcase a character for a while and see if they got any traction, any popularity from the readers, and then they might spin off into their own title because, again, Marvel was looking to expand their title selection. And their first issue featured a guy that didn't identify as Native American or cowboy. He was called Werewolf. I forgot his whole backstory. I read that issue a long, long time ago. I think they brought him back in this century at some point, kind of rebooted him and did something quasi interesting with them, probably after the great Jonah Hex run of Palmiotti and Gray. I don't know, but
I think Walker brought him back for the Occupy Avengers run, if I'm correct. Had that was kind of a buddy comic with him and Hawkeye, and I thought that was pretty interesting.
Like David
it's a cool
Walker?
Character. Yeah.
Okay, I never read that. So he had a book for that first issue, and the second issue is the premiere of Werewolf by Night as a character. So let's dive into Marvel Spotlight number 2. As a trigger warning here for folks that are people that like to slab their books and never touch them ever again, I am going to upset you. I bought the entire run of Werewolf by Night stuff, and I sent it off and had it library bound. So they chopped their spines off, glued them all together, mutilated them into hardbound library books. So I apologize, but I'm not sorry.
You should not be sorry. I really respect you for that. You've mangled them to where they can now only be used for their intended purpose.
Yes. So I'm opening up my giant 500-page volume 1 of Werewolf by Night. Who did this cover, by the way?
Oh, the cover's Plug, right?
Is it?
I think so, yeah. It's a great cover, and it's really evocative of the Atlas horror stuff. It reminded me of like a Menace cover or something, like the cool panels. I just liked the whole layout of it. Had a bit of a retro feel, even for the time.
Yeah, agreed. So we're looking at Marvel Spotlight on Werewolf by Night is the title, and then there's 3 square panels and then a big, huge rectangular panel under that, and it's storytelling with word balloons, which is kind of a throwback a little bit, right? I mean, as far as like having panels within a cover, that seemed kind of odd. I guess I was not sure if it was Plug because the design of the monster doesn't look anything like he draws him anywhere else ever, including this issue. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you are you are right on that. I mean, this is Plug's first Marvel comic and his very first color comic I think he ever did. He was previously apprenticed with Will Eisner for a bit and then moved on, did some Warren stories, but he hadn't really done a whole lot. This is his first real major work, I would say.
And Marvel, the folks at Marvel weren't 100% keen on his work at first. They weren't sure if he was a good fit for them. I feel like from some of the articles we were reading before this.
No, they thought he would be too cartoony. And in some of the drawing, I can see an Eisner influence, definitely. I think sometimes the character looks a little Spirit-esque. You know, you can see kind of the jaws, different things like that. Definitely reminded me of that.
Yes, and early on here, I can almost see some of the cartoony stuff. When we see our main character in his human form, when he first wakes up, or not that, but there's a few different panels where there's humans talking to each other in the normal situation, and they look like almost Archie. And I mean, a little more detailed than Archie, but there was a couple headshots where it's like that's almost Archie-ish. That's not an insult, by the way. I love cartooning. I love Archie. I just was I could kind of see Stan Lee flipping through this book, like when Jack's talking to his mom at his birthday party. It was definitely some loose line work and some kind of very simplified, so cartooned depictions, which might have thrown somebody off. I can see that.
Yeah, definitely. It wasn't necessarily the Marvel House style, so it was a departure for Marvel. Absolutely, it wasn't Ramita, it wasn't Kirby or Ditko, and that they kind of set the trend style wise at Marvel for a decade.
Yeah. And I think they were very leery of straying away from the formula at that point. So I can see why they were concerned. I love Mike Plug. So I guess just real quick, I grew up a monster kid out of time, right? I grew up in the 80s, but I should have been in the 60s with all those kids that were 12 when this came out. And I don't know how I stumbled across this guy, but it's at a comic book store in my small little hometown. And I think I was flipping through a long box in there, and I believe I found issue 39 first, which has Brother Voodoo, which has always been one of my very favorite characters because I read that issue a dozen times, right? It's mid-action when it starts, like in the middle of a storyline. I have no idea what's going on, who any of these people are. But so then I went back and I found Werewolf by Night #1 there, and it was like back then, I don't know what that fetches nowadays, but it was very fine condition, and it was kind of was like $12 or $15. That was a lot of money to me in 1986, 1987, right?
Yeah, holy shit.
And much to my chagrin, I got home and I said, I'm finally going to get to the start of this story. And I opened up Werewolf by Night #1, and it was in the middle of a fucking cliffhanger. It was starting a story, and I had no idea what was going on. So it took me a while to find out that Marvel Spotlight featured his first 3 outings, and his story wrapped in Werewolf by Night #1. So it took me a long time to get here, but in that process, I became obsessed with Mike Ploog. I absolutely love the way he draws monsters. I think that he's an absolute beast, no pun intended, with his line work and his dynamism and some of his layout. I mean, the fact I'm not surprised at all that he worked with Eisner. It's very, very clear in some of these layouts and the way that he draws your eye around these big kind of splash panels through all the features. Not surprised at all. I'm a huge fan of Ploog.
No, his layouts really are amazing.
Yeah. So let's dig in. Oh, so the cover was just very, very 50s looking, like early 60s, a guy in a cardigan wearing a button-up shirt, running away because the moon's coming out and he's starting to change, and then he turns into a beast, and then he's snarling on what looks like a college campus or something. So, and he's very kind
funny.
of
like the even the guy on there doesn't even quite look like our character on the inside either. You're right. It's like, maybe this was done way before or a little after, who knows? But yeah, you're right. It is different.
And it might be worth noting that while this is the first appearance of this character, the title Werewolf by Night was pulled by Stan Lee out of an earlier, I think, Atlas era horror story, right? That they did.
Yeah, it was
unrelated.
It was an Atlas era story from Marvel Tales 116. That was from I think it was 1953. And it was most likely it was written by Stan Lee. It was penciled by William Weltman, and really doesn't have anything to do with the story now. But they basically probably just wanted to reuse that cool title.
Yeah.
And it is a cool title.
It is. I used to not be a fan of it because it seemed obvious and dorky. Like, well, of course he's a werewolf by night. When else is he going to be a werewolf? But then I realized, he's a tortured teenage youth by day. Yes. Werewolf by night. Yeah. And it all made sense. But this does feel like it's an inventory illustration to me. Like, I feel like this, it looks modern. It doesn't look like they pulled it out of the late 50s, but it feels unrelated. I don't know. Maybe it was a test piece that I got from Ploog. But anyway, should we talk a bit about why this character, I keep kind of digressing here, but why, what Stan Lee was going for, or what they editorial was kind of hoping that would happen, as far as like this character being a character, not just a monster?
Well, yeah, I mean, Stan Lee was obviously, still editing. He wasn't writing as much anymore, and he was starting to be a bit checked out at this time. I mean, his right-hand man for many years, Roy Thomas, was much more in charge of editing and kind of what was going on. And he and his wife came up with the concept of Werewolf by Night, which they talk about in that back issue that we kind of read in research of this. And so I think that, Roy Thomas, came up with the idea and talked about that he wanted the character to be, like you said, like a teenager, kind of like a Spider-Man type, a tortured teenager, because that worked really well in Spider-Man, and it actually works really well here.
And his wife, Jeannie, I think, was it her or both of them that said that, I was a teenage werewolf was the idea of like where this, this should be a comic book, an ongoing story.
Yeah. They really liked the Michael Landon movie.
Yeah. And if you haven't seen it, folks, it's kind of a mainstay of schlocky teen programmer drive-in stuff, but it's not bad. I actually enjoy it. It's not Nicholas Ray or anything, but it's definitely Rebel Without a Cause with drive-in sensibility and a werewolf. I mean, he's like a tortured teenage pretty boy. So yeah, I mean, it has all the pieces for some great drama that Marvel was known for from their 60s characters, right?
Yeah, and Roy Thomas
Teens with troubles.
They wanted to originally call it I, Werewolf.
That's right.
But I think Stan's biggest contribution to this whole thing was saying, no, we'll call it Werewolf by Night. So he was right. It is better than I, Werewolf.
Yeah. I like I, Vampire. I've read that.
Yeah.
That DC book. It's all right.
Yeah. Jerry Conway wrote this. He was a teenager himself at the time. I think he was 19 when this came out.
Really?
Yeah. No, he started when he was 16. So he sold his first story to DC. I think it's in House of Secrets 81. It's the issue of House of Secrets that basically sets up the whole premise of the Bronze Age run with Abel, inheriting the house. And so there are these 3 stories that are all about this house. And he wrote one of them. And I think he was 16 when he sold it. I think it was about 17 when it was published. But so he was super young and ended up, having a huge career and just wrote every single character you could think of for Marvel and DC. But at the time of this publishing, he's 19.
Okay, that's funny because when I was creating the Instagram account, folks, which you can follow us on Instagram, our account name is at Werewolf by Night Podcast, which is easy to find. I immediately followed Jerry Conway, and his handle was like Jerry Conway 52, and I was like, he can't have been born in 52. That would make him like 18 or 19 when he started doing this work, but so he was.
Yeah, he was.
Okay, wow. Crazy. It's okay. Okay, so we got a first page, and it says First Night. And this is a frequent thing that's going to come through these comics, is that this is a great format for a werewolf story because this is published every 30 days, and there's a cycle of the moon every 30 days. So a lot of these stories are broken into the 3 nights of the month of the cycle. So
I thought that's such a cool way to do it. I really identified with that immediately. It's such a neat storytelling device.
Yeah, I love it. We get this beautiful drawing of this figure from the bottom half walking out of an alleyway and moonlight casting a harsh shadow on a dirty alley wall. And that immediately evoked to me like the Romita Spider-Man I Quit. You know that I think Marvel's had really great luck with characters walking out of alleyways with their art. Like
it's been a big seller for them.
Let's just get a scattergun of great stuff we know works. First panel. Our character's trudging around. There's some narration that's saying, I'm fuzzy headed. I don't know what's going on. I've got this rage. He's not quite conscious of who he is or what's going on. And then he sees a mugger lurch out of the shadows, and the guy approaches him, and he rears up in a great illustration with a huge looming moon behind him. And the guy realizes in moonlight this is an actual werewolf, and he attacks.
I think it's a funny thing that does come up more and more, that people aren't afraid until they realize it's not a costume, and then they freak the fuck out. Yes. It's like a device that's used over and over again that we're like, oh, it's just some dude in a costume. Oh shit, it's not.
Yeah, and I realized, they go that well quite a bit for a while there, because it is kind of hard to wrap your head around just seeing this guy loping around Malibu. But it is a little funny.
Maybe you could tell us more about the setting. I know you really like the setting's important, and it's also a really cool device.
Yeah. So this is set in, this character. Okay, we need to get the character name out of the way. We haven't met him yet. We've met his bestial self, but we're going to start talking about him by name. His name is Jack Russell. And if you're a dog enthusiast, you might be aware that's a dog breed, which seemed like a really corny joke. Apparently, Jerry Conway does not, or was it Roy Thomas? Whoever named him doesn't really like dogs and didn't realize that was a dog name.
Okay, so the funny thing, Roy Thomas, since the 60s, before he even worked at Marvel, had published a fanzine called Alter Ego. And he's published it as a magazine for many years. There's a big article, I think it's in issue 151. It's a huge article interviewing Jerry Conway. And Roy Thomas is the editor. He wasn't the interviewer. And so as the editor throughout this interview, he'll interject these little things, little editor's notes that are kind of snarky. And there was the point when they talk about the name, and Jerry Conway was like, oh, I don't think I probably wasn't the one that named him. That was probably Roy. And then Roy interjects. He was like, no, Jerry's wrong. He was the one that named it. So no one wants to take credit for giving him this pretty cheesy name. Both of them are just like, oh, I didn't know it was a dog breed. Like I would have never called him that. It's a silly name, and no one wants to take credit for it.
So you think it was intentional, and people are just passing it like a turd?
I think it was, and I think that whoever did it is embarrassed enough to where they're not going to take credit.
I admit I rolled my eyes pretty hard the first time I saw that a Wolfman's name was Jack Russell.
It's corny. Even for Stan Lee, that's corny.
Yeah, I think that he might have rejected that if he was not checked out. So his name is not actually Jack. His name is Jacob, like my erstwhile co-host here. And Russell is not his born name, but we'll find that out later. But he's known as Jack Russell to everyone else. So yeah, on the next page we have. So first of all, this is quite an event here. On the first page, our hero has just murdered a mugger.
Hold it right there! What in the name of... Good Lord.
The man I'd attacked was dead.
Yeah,
right.
Which is,
he's dead, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is another thing of the lessening of the comics code. This was not seen a whole lot. People get murdered a lot, even in this first issue. There's a big body count in the first 5 issues of this. Yeah,
he's definitely an anti-hero. It's almost hard to even call him an anti-hero until later, until you start bringing in titled villains that are increasingly bizarre and odd and more fun. He's just a monster. But it was so hard to wrap my head around. Like he just killed somebody. That's going to be unusual for a lot of folks who are reading this for the first time. Another thing that might be unusual is that he is not a Superman. When he turns into the wolf, he does not get this Kryptonian strength. Be prepared to see your main character get his ass handed to him quite a bit throughout the run of this comic book. He is stronger. He has the enhanced strength of a wolf man, but he is not invincible, and he gets his ass whooped quite a few times, if I recall.
Yeah, he really does. By big guys, but still. Yeah. He gets his ass kicked.
One of the odd things to me about this, rereading this, so I haven't read these issues in a decade and a half, was that the narration, or rather the first person narration from the main character exists, because that gets abandoned as this goes on, and the narrator's sole job is to narrate what the beast is doing, because and I think that was a good move. I don't know if I like this kind of Jack Russell on autopilot, kind of like in the back seat watching himself do these things. It works here and there, but I kind of like it a lot more when he's kind of waking up and realizing what's happened, and we, the viewer or reader, have been seeing the whole thing kind of unfold. I guess I'm not making that clear, but just like the Wolfman thinks a lot in this first couple issues, and he doesn't really do that as much. He's just more primordial beast. He wants to get out of the city and out to go hunt a deer in the woods or something.
Yeah, I think the first person narration works. And again, that was something that Roy Thomas takes credit for, because he said that, it was originally going to be called I, Vampire. Mm-hmm. And he would definitely I, Werewolf, and he wanted it to have that first person narration.
Right. So a cop sees our beast over this murdered mugger, and realizes that something's amiss and starts firing at him and hits him as he runs away.
Lord, the way it runs, like a man.
There was a bridge, a muddy river. I dived in, my shoulder afire, with the agony of a glancing bullet. My arm.
There's a beautiful panel here after Jack has escaped and the police are looking for him. He jumps off a bridge, and it's all monochromatic. So it's all blues and purples. The bridge is purple. The smokestacks on the mountain in the background are blue. The sky's black. The gnarled tree and the river and Jack are all in blues as he's nursing his shot arm, except for these flashlight beams just slicing through it yellow. Totally striking composition to me.
Yeah, there's a lot of beautiful panels like that, but I like how they use the monochromatic in a few panels in the next pages.
Yeah, I think it's really effective, and he doesn't use it constantly, so it's always something to look forward to. Yeah, Jacob, why don't you take it here for a little bit?
Yeah, so we see our hero running through an alley, jumping a fence. It's basically just a lot of the narration and his thought. My thoughts are unclear. Why am I here? And the next page, then he awakes and he's in his human form. And it's the first time we see Jack Russell in his human form.
And he looks a bit like Archie, actually.
A little bit. Yeah, he does a little bit like Archie. This has my favorite line in the whole comic, which is after he wakes up, says he's a bit hysterical, and then he says, "And why not? Today I'm legal, a full-fledged hunk of draft bait."
I knew you were going to love that.
It is.
Yes.
It's a line that sounds like a kid would say it, and also sounds like no human on earth has ever uttered that line.
Yeah.
It's just a bunch of words together that I am not used to hearing together.
Yeah, so Jack has woken up from what he thought was a nightmare, and it's his 18th birthday. And he is, what is he? Draft bait? A hunk? Full-fledged hunk.
He's a hunk of draft bait.
Yeah.
Which I laugh and think is corny, and then I'm like, oh shit, Jerry Conway was draft age too. So
yeah, that's right.
I'm like, oh shit, I guess a draft age kid did write this and did say that.
Right. Maybe it wasn't just, yeah. I always think of like Stan Lee is always perpetually 50 years old and he writes everything in Marvel ever did in my mind. Like you know what I mean? But like when you actually stop and think like, no, this was Conway and he was 19 and Vietnam was fucking horrifying.
Yeah. No, this is the first time that a 19-year-old has written dialogue for someone around his age. Like you say, and in the comics history before, it's all 40 and 50-year-old men being like, yeah, cat, groovy.
Yeah. Which, Stan was notorious for some really tone-deaf 60s slang writing, right?
Yeah.
Like some of his Spider-Man, like Gwen and Mary Jane. Whew. Anyway, no, he can't write females. He can't write young. So let's throw him a bunch of teenage girls to write.
Yeah, but at least no one's being called a milksop in this issue, so that's good.
That's right. Yeah, thanks, Tiger. Okay, so it's Jack's birthday. We meet Jack's mom. She looks a little haggard, a little tired, a little unhappy. She's got kind of a Faye Dunaway thing going on.
She does. I noticed that too.
Yeah. And then we meet Jack's younger sister, Lisa. And that is, I was tortured for years about how you say her name because it's Lissa. So I mentally always said Lissa, but
I did too until you told me.
Well, and again, I am basing the pronunciation off of Power Records, which I don't think that was a really high-priced contract that Marvel was really stewing over and had a guy babysitting in the studio. So maybe it is Lissa. I don't know. We come to find out that these two kids are not born in America. They're transplants. They're actually Transylvanian, half Transylvanian. So maybe Lissa is a Romanian thing. I don't know.
Let's go with that.
We'll get somebody. We're calling her Lissa or Lisa. We will need to pick.
I think we should just call her Lisa.
Okay. Damn it.
Yeah, I'm just going to go for it.
Okay. And so another thing that I love about Jack Russell and Werewolf by Night is this is the early 70s. There's some wonderful mutton chops on Jack. I mean, he has mutton chops going down to his jawline.
They're majestic.
He wears a kerchief tied around his neck like Fred from Scooby-Doo. Always has bell bottoms going on. I love him. So he's all hung up on it's his birthday, and his sister's like, if you just kind of stop worrying about yourself and being blown apart in Vietnam for like 3 seconds, you see that Mom's got some stuff going on. And we get to look at Grant, who is the family chauffeur, which is our first indication that the Russells have money. And Grant is a big hulking beast of a chauffeur, and he's chewing his boss out like a mofo. He's got jodhpurs. Is that what you call those?
Yep.
He looks like a leather daddy, first of all. He's like all in black chauffeur getup, but the way it's inked and colored, it looks like it's all leather, and he's got like a Freddie Mercury hat, and he's just bawling Mom out. And Jack wants to know why their stepdad lets the chauffeur talk to Mom like that. But he also notes that Grant could tear him apart with his bare hands should he want to.
Yeah. No, Grant is terrifying and huge.
Remember that. Yeah, he is huge and swarthy. And then we get to meet Philip Russell, the stepfather of Lisa and Jack. And he is everything you would expect from the 60s brought into the early 70s. He's reading the paper at the morning table, smoking a pipe. right?
You're right. It could not get more stereotypical 60s
Bob Dobb.
square dad.
Yeah. And so, he's saying, hey, don't worry about Grant. He's a great chauffeur. He's going to yell at you every once in a while and kind of physically menace you, but he's a really good driver. Just leave him alone. Mom gave in as always. He ruled her like a tyrant. And sometimes I think he has other plans. So there's a seed laid here that maybe stepdad isn't so great.
Yeah.
Jack has to get out of the house. Even though it's his birthday, he's got a party later, but he needs to clear his head. This whole turning 18, what's it, draft bait? I don't know. I will remember that at some point.
Hunk of draft bait.
It's weighing heavy on his mind, so he gets out of there. And then
it shows us at the end of this, it says, it lets us know he drove down to Malibu. So, most Marvel comics before this time were set in New York.
Yes, everything happens in New York.
Everything, yeah. So all the characters interacted with each other. It was Manhattan all the way,
except for Daredevil.
Who eventually, Daredevil started in Hell's Kitchen and then moved to SF.
And who did that? Was that Conway or was that Thomas?
I thought that was Conway.
Okay.
Yeah, so Conway takes credit for the setting being West Coast and being Malibu, especially. And you were right when you were describing the series to me. You were just like, it's this it's set in this gothic Malibu,
and I did not.
Such a weird.
Yeah, and I did not coin that. That actually gets brought up in the letters page later on, where I think Marv Wolfman might be the one who says it and coins it. But he's saying that's what we're going for. It's like we're trying to transplant the Universal horror films into affluent Malibu of today, and so we're going for what we're calling Malibu Gothic. And I fucking flipped my lid when I read that. Like, that's the coolest, stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. Like, totally obsessed with it from then on, and I think about it constantly.
It's very cool.
Yeah, it is very cool. And it's weird that there are these efforts to make things happen in LA. And some of these titles, they moved Daredevil out there for a while from Hell's Kitchen and stuff, and they never take, right? Like, to the point where, like, you ever read Runaways?
Yeah.
What was that, 2004? Like, that was still a novel idea. Like, hey, let's do something. Let's just have a crime syndicate out in LA because there are no heroes here. We can literally run the West Coast from a base in LA as these super rich villains and just be totally secret, and no one's ever going to mess with us. It was still like nothing ever changed. I think it's so weird that the East Coast, I know the publishing world is in the East Coast. So that was the case, right? I mean, nowadays now Portland's kind of the epicenter of
weirdly enough. But you had the 80s, you had the West Coast Avengers and the 70s and 80s. But you're right. There were these moves always. The X-Men lived out in the West Coast for a while. Yeah. It never sticks. They always end up going back to the East Coast.
And there were those West Coast Avengers.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Yeah. Less said about them, the better.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what happens when you let Hawkeye lead a team.
Yeah. Silver Iron Man.
Yeah.
Right on. So we get to see there's some really groovy stuff in here as well. Like at Jack's party, there's a dude we can only see from behind playing guitar. I'm sure he's playing a Don McLean song. There's like a stained glass chandelier. All the women are wearing like serapes or whatever, or shawls or ponchos, whatever the hell you call those things, and headbands.
So we meet Terry, who does show up later on again, I think.
Does she?
Yeah.
This is my first read in like 15 years of this. So
yeah.
Okay. I can't remember if they were a couple or not.
Yeah, she shows up. I think she shows back up in issue 2 of the actual series. I've read a little bit ahead, but yeah,
she's
you're
shooting
right.
up with Roy Harper.
Yeah.
I want something bad. I wanted her to put like a white blotter on her headband and have a bad trip or something. This is, well, it's not San Francisco, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. No, it's very swinging, very early 70s. Yeah, shag carpet. Even though you can't see it, you know it's there.
You can feel it under your toes.
Yeah.
There's ferns in the background, literally. Jack starts changing mid-party and has to get out of there and just runs away outside onto the grounds and sees Grant, the chauffeur, messing with the limousine.
Yeah, and his reaction is pretty violent already. He's just like, "Who's there? If that's that punk kid, I'll break him."
Yeah, I love that he's
like,
just
God
a powder
damn,
keg.
Grant. Yeah, he's just, and you're right. You can really get a good sense of those jodhpurs he's wearing.
Yeah.
Even when he's fixing the limo, he's got his directing pants on.
Yes. Oh my God. And he runs down the beach. Another beautiful monochromatic panel of Jack shirtless, tromping around in the tide pools under the moon, changing. And the first like great monster panel for me was the close up of when Jack notices his hand, and there's this beautiful detailed line work of all the fur clutching the sand. And he screams out, "My hand." I love that panel.
It's an awesome panel. It might be one of the best panels in the issue for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And Plug does some amazing transformation panels.
Yes.
Like they're so top notch. But yeah, this is great because it's obviously from his perspective. If you were changing into a werewolf, that's what you would see first. So yeah, it's really great.
And then from realizing that he's changing, he looks down into the pool of water under him and sees for the first time that was not a dream last night. He is the beast. And he realizes that. And then we get the next panel, second night. Love it.
Yeah, I love it too.
One of the things I love here is that Malibu, I thought, was kind of like an upscale place that was kind of hard to get beachside property, but he seems to have found a rundown mansion. Did I read that right?
Yeah, no, you're
okay.
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, you're right. I mean, I don't know exactly what Malibu was in 1971, 72. I mean, I'm assuming it's always been pretty fancy, but yeah, there might be some weird rundown mansions, I guess.
Yeah, there's definitely some fun things in here where they kind of inject some of that kind of universal stuff in here, right? Like you just need to have a spooky old mansion, and Malibu be damned, there's got to just be one, even on a cliff overlooking a gorgeous bay.
Yeah. And not just a spooky old mansion with a giant wolf inside of it.
Yes, infested by wolves. And Jack enters and he challenges this wolf, and he's understanding that it's like him but not him, and they battle. Again, Jack's not handing this thing its ass. It's kind of equally matched. He uses a little awesome judo move to do the fall back and kick your legs back and throw the wolf over the side of the cliff. Love that.
Yeah, I would love to see a werewolf actually fight like this in a movie. I don't know if it would be so ridiculous or if it would be really awesome and should be done.
And so, listener, if you are only familiar with maybe some of the 90s incarnations of Jack Russell or some of his, I mean, he's appeared many different times and been reworked so many different times. He's almost got as many incarnations as the Hulk. The classic Werewolf by Night Jack Russell is the man wolf. So think Lon Chaney Jr. in the Wolfman. He does not become lupine, and he's not like the wolf from An American Werewolf in London. He doesn't have a wolf head on a man body. He's very much the classic Hollywood Universal Wolfman. Although he does become those different iterations at different times throughout his lifespan.
But you're right. This is really classic Hollywood man wolf.
Yes. You're reading this through the Marvel. What's the app called?
I'm reading it on Marvel Unlimited.
Okay, so folks, you can get this collected in an omnibus, I believe, which honestly, I would not have mutilated my comic books if I'd known they were going to make an omnibus. I literally had the entire run and said, there's 3 volumes of Tomb of Dracula omnibus right now out. There's never going to be a Werewolf by Night one, Matt. Just give it up. Send the fucking book off to the guys and just have them mutilate it. And I think I like 3 years later, it came out.
I like when you told me that you had told people that you had bound these issues and everyone was mad at you because you ended up like mutilating Moon Knight's first appearance.
Yep.
I like that just incensed people.
Not number 32.
Yeah, that makes me so happy.
Even issue 32. So, and by the way, this show is going to be just Jacob and I doing this, and we're going to do this on shorter form. We spent a lot of time at the beginning here kind of setting up the stage for how this title came to be and who got involved in it. But generally, this is going to be kind of a quick trot through these and just kind of us having a little bit of fun with them and just kind of tiptoeing through them and having a blast. But there might be a guest at one point here or there. A friend of another podcast that I'm on who is from Australia named Andrew is the world's biggest Moon Knight fan ever. And I have a feeling he'll want to be on that episode. So I'm going to go ahead and put a marker on that one for him. But they're mostly be just me and Jacob here. Okay, back to the story. Jack has stumbled home and reverted to his human form and somehow made it back to his place. And his stepfather runs down, says, "We're looking everywhere for you." And there's a big revelation here. And he gets it on all sides in this as a human. Yeah. He gets a lot of family shit in this book.
He does.
So he's literally being lifted up by his stepfather, Philip. Like, let's get him aside to get him some coffee. You know, they're looking for him all night. He left his party freaking out. They thought he probably dropped acid or something. Who knows what happened. They get him inside, and Lisa's crying, and he's saying, "What's wrong? What's going on?" And Philip says, "She can't answer you, Jack." "What? Why not? Your sister's almost hysterical. Or are you too tied up in yourself to notice that?" He says, "Dad, please tell me what's going on. If you'd been here, you'd know your mother was almost killed tonight, Jack. She's lucky to be alive."
Philip is so dramatic.
Yeah, we find out that his mom went out looking for him, and she got into a wreck. The doctor sedates Jack because he's so upset. And he wakes up later and goes to the hospital, and he goes in to see his mom. This is our origin story, really. She explains to him that she knew that when he left the party what was going on, because he is cursed by his bloodline to be a werewolf on his 18th birthday and every full moon following that for the rest of his mortal life. And she knows that because she was married. As a student, she traveled abroad to Transylvania. It's not specific in here, but it is canonized later that it's Transylvania.
I like that here it says a small Baltic state.
Yeah.
It's as generic Transylvania as you can get.
So she actually meets and marries Baron Gregory Russoff. So we find out that the true name of our character, Jack Russell, is Jacob Russoff, Russoff. And he was born there in the castle, the Baron's Manor, barony, whatever you call that. And so is Lisa. So they're both actually nationalist, Romanian nationals. How do you say that?
I like how that sounds.
They have dual citizenship in Romania and the U.S. At any rate, Mom's flashing back and saying, everything was great. I love your father. He's a great guy, a little intense. But, 3 nights every month, he'd lock himself up in the tower and study these creepy old books. And I just thought that was him just being a weirdo. But one night there was a storm and it blew the tower, a big hole in the tower. And then a werewolf attacked the villagers. And Dad gets murdered by villagers with silver bullets. And the mom realizes what happened and that after the fact that there's a curse. But one thing I love is this have your cake and eat it too thing. When Mom is talking to the villagers, you're immediately taken to Ghost of Frankenstein or any of the, super inferior sequels to the Universal Frankenstein movie, where there's like a Burgomeister. Everyone's like wearing like these totally period, like anachronistic clothes. I mean, maybe not. Maybe people dress like that in Romania in 1971. I don't know. But they look like it's 1930. Everyone talks that way. Everything's castles and inns. It's just like if you just once you leave, the airport. It's just castles.
Yeah, it's very gothic, very, very, like you say, the Universal horror film background. Yeah, to a T.
Yeah, and we're treated to in the flashback, we do see a great panel of his father being hunted down by villagers and baying hounds. Absolutely gorgeous. We're also on Twitter, by the way, at Werewolf Podcast. When I'm going to make a point of taking pictures of some of these, whenever we call out a panel that we think is especially great, I'll tweet those and put them out on Instagram just so people can see them in case they're not reading along at home. But I highly recommend you pick up an omnibus or get the Marvel app and read along with us. This is great stuff.
Yeah, I'm looking at page 18 here. describing on how he was shot and killed, and just the whole layout of the page is just gorgeous. You're right. It does have the hints of Eisner, hints of the Spirit Sunday section, how panels just kind of are combined into other panels. And it's just amazing.
Yeah. Like, maybe this. I used to kind of know all my inside baseball terminology for comic stuff. What is that called? Like in this panel here where there's a villager, he's holding a shotgun and he's blasting it, and the shotgun and its blast go out of the border of the panel into the next panel and lead your eye over to the werewolf buckling over because he was just shot by the gun we're seeing. What is that called when it extends out of the panel and directs the eye like that?
I know. I really should know, but I'm blanking on it as well. I mean, it's a really cool artistic device that's used, like you were saying, to kind of help your eye move to the next panel where action has happened. And yeah, it's really cool. It's just a cool way of doing things.
And Eisner was a bona fide genius at doing it. I mean, layouts and leading the eye and all of those novel splash pages that Eisner created for the Spirit, where it's just these gorgeous ways of incorporating lettering and the title into the layout of the actual splash. I mean, he was a monster, and Plug learned a lot under him, and you can see it applied here and there for sure. There's another one of those. Jack's tearfully hearing from his mom. She makes him a vow, right? Like just like in Amazing Fantasy 15 or whatever, you have to have, the vow. And the mom says, your stepdad's a good guy, right? He's a little mixed up. He's a little whatever. But you have to promise me you will never lay a hand on him. And then she drops dead in the hospital.
Yeah, it's not the best vow.
No, it is not. But it has a very dramatic function that will be very interesting for the months to come for us.
Yeah. Well, it keeps Philip alive. That's for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's another great panel that mind-blowing, a transformation panel that is fucking gorgeous, where Plug uses werewolf fur to fill in the background. So there's iterations of Jack changing, and it's all connected by fur going through the whole thing. So it's one big swath. And at the bottom is full transformed werewolf and the mom's dead face and reflected in his eyes. Gorgeous.
God, it is. It's really amazing.
So mom's dead and he can't kill. I neglected to mention that he puts together pretty fast that Grant monkeying with the car when he left on his birthday, that was him fucking with the brakes. So mom was killed. And
yes, by Grant.
So now he wants Grant and stepdad Philip. He wants their head on a platter, and he's just turned into the beast. So we've got a problem because he also just promised his mom he'd never hurt Philip.
Well, he does his favorite thing. He jumps out a window. He kind of like backs out of a window in this panel, which is kind of weird, and is heading to the warehouse to meet Grant. And now we've reached the big Grant fight.
Yes, he somehow remembered South Street because I think he overheard Grant talking on the phone or something. He says, South Street, why do those words come to me as though someone spoke them in my ear? And then we have a full page ad for Tammy Wynette sings all her greatest hits. Oh, wait, you don't have the ads.
God, I wish I had the ads. That is the one thing about Marvel Unlimited. I wish it had the ads and the letters page.
Yeah, omnibus editions don't either. So
it's a bummer.
I will be selecting one letter, I hope, to read, or at least some good letters to share as we go through this, just so you can hear some of these, because they're some of the fan feedback's pretty funny as this goes on.
That's a great idea.
All right, so we have the big Grant fight. Grant's lighting up a cigarette. The wolf is crouching above him. Very cool layout. Jumps down on top of him. And Grant's ready, man. Flips him over like judo. This fight doesn't go so great. Grant's kind of kicking his ass.
No, Jack Russell is getting his ass handed to him.
Yes. By a chauffeur wearing white gloves.
Whose shirt is torn off, and we see that he is very muscular and really angry.
He throws Jack through like a crate or some type of a wall and says he stood over me, his chest heaving, his face red and glistening with sweat, And inside that werewolf's form, a boy called Jack became a man. So something happens there, and he snaps. And that's when Grant, Jacob, you alluded to this earlier, says, something about wearing a mask, right? Is that what this is? Or has that already happened? Maybe that already happened. But he still thinks that this is a nut in a Wolfman suit.
Yeah. No, he's fully convinced that this is just some asshole wearing a Wolfman mask. And so he's ready to just choke this guy out.
And so there's a 4-page panel of Grant choking the wolf out. And then Grant realizes that it's not a mask, and that's what actually breaks his concentration and saves Jack's life.
Yep. Not for the last time.
No. Yeah. And so Grant says, to hell with this, and bricks it out of there. And the wolf pounds on him, and we don't get to see it except in silhouette, but chokes him out or tears his throat out or something.
Yeah, Grant is dead.
Grant is dead. Long live Grant. And then someone else comes in, and I think we know who that is. It's stepdad Philip.
Yep, Philip shows up. Seems like he had a prearranged meeting with Grant. He calls out for Grant, says, Grant, I got that money. I got it all, $10,000. And so Grant wasn't there.
Yeah, that this was an arranged deal to get some money to knock off the wife. And the wolf is in an awkward position. He's there heaving on the other side of a wall, unable to act because he can remember through his rage animal brain his promise to his mother. And so Philip walks around, can't find Grant, gets back in his car, drives away, and we see the werewolf howling at the moon in rage. He says, for I realized one more thing, something that was already dissolving in an animal rage, even as the thought that held it formed. What could revenge matter? What could it ever matter to a boy, now a man, now a wolf? Fini?
Question mark. It's a great issue. And, I think it's written really well. It has that 10% cheese factor instead of like a 50% cheese factor, which has been the majority of the Marvel books up to that point, even the good ones.
Yeah.
But no, I think, and in reading some of Conway's other stuff, I prefer his horror writing to his superhero writing. I really like the horror stuff that he did before this at DC. Like I say, he did some for House of Secrets. He did some stories for Witching Hour. And yeah, for a teenager, he was a really great writer and was really effective.
So that is our first issue. That's where we meet Jack Russell and we understand the curse and the curse of a promise he made to his dying mother. So we have set up the premise here that every month there's a fresh set of full moons and that our young teenage boy will be taken over by his animal instincts and unleashed on LA. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
I really did. I can't thank you enough for the recommendation and for asking me to host this with you. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, it's going to be so much fun. I'm very much looking forward to it. Since you've read ahead a little bit, you already know this, but one of the things I love about this series is they do stick to the kind of gothic horror thing at first, with introducing kind of like hunchback character or a whatever kind of monster and this, that, and the other. But as it goes on, they kind of it gets increasingly more strange and more outlandish, in my opinion. For those of you listening out there, Conway's just on for the first few months here, I think. Maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6 issues. Thankfully, we have Plug for the first 16. And then there's a little bit of revolving, but not much. Tom Sutton comes in at one point and does some issues here and there. Tony Isabella writes a little bit. Mike Fredric, does that sound right?
Mm-hmm.
Writes an issue or two. There's some giant size stuff. There's this, that, and the other. But the main team here for the first run of this is going to be, after Jerry leaves, Wolfman and Plug, which is considered kind of the classic run by a lot of people. And then after that, the run was primarily, honestly, from like 17 on, was mostly Doug Mensch and is that how you say his name?
I think so. I'll have to figure that out. His name has always kind of perplexed me a little bit.
I have never said it out loud until just now, and I realized
Menke or yeah, I know.
It's Moench, right?
That's right.
Mensch. I don't know. We'll find that out.
We'll get it right.
He wrote the majority of the run, and Don Perlin did the pencils, and we're in good hands there, and we're in for some really wacky stuff over the next year. We'll try and do this an episode a week. Obviously, life intervenes, it gets in the way here and there, and that's going to happen. But for the most part, this will be 45 minutes to an hour, one a week, and we'll be going through this and having a blast. And we hope you guys stay with us. Please follow us on Instagram. Again, it's at Werewolf by Night Podcast, and on Twitter we're at Werewolf Podcast. We'd love to hear what you think of the show. Give us any feedback, chime in, let us know if we're crazy or wrong. I'm sure I'll be wrong a lot. I'm often wrong a lot.
I'm expecting to be wrong too. It's going to happen.
Well, I'm leaning on you because you are so great about research and everything else. So anyway, thanks out there for listening, you guys. This was a long episode, but we had to get this packed with context. We wanted everybody to know right where this came from and dive right into it. So we did that, and we've got our hero established, our anti-hero or our non-hero. At any rate, we'll be back for Marvel Spotlight number 3, which is the second appearance, and the introduction, I believe, of a dark tome in Marvel history. Am I getting ahead of myself? Is it introduced? The Darkhold?
I think Darkhold is issue 3. It's either issue 3 or 4. So
this next little run, Marvel Spotlight 3, 4, and Werewolf by Night number 1, I think is one of my favorite stories, though. There's a lot of great stuff to come, but this upcoming story arc is one of my favorites. And it introduces the book, basically Marvel's kind of equivalent of the Necronomicon, the Darkhold. And Jack and the Darkhold are inextricably linked for the rest of their existence. So this is a very important story coming up. So join us next week for the first part of that three issue arc. All right. Anything else we need to say, Jacob?
No, I think I'm good. This has been great. I'm excited to do this.
Right on. Okay. Well, for the Werewolf by Night podcast, I'm Matt Howell.
I'm Jacob Balcom.
All right, guys. Take care of yourselves. We'll make a call off kind of thing at some point.
No, it sounds great.
Rarely do those just come shippingly off the tongue last second.
It's hard to do those organically.
Yeah. I didn't have a big wolf howl in me, so.
Werewolf.